Yes, and we're going to talk about the game of the weekend now, Saturday evening's game, with Ireland and Italy being the only other. It was always going to be the biggest game of the weekend, and indeed, prior to any of the France-Scotland stuff, it was probably always going to be the game of the weekend anyway. Wales against England, another classic, this time a 64-point classic.
Unbelievable. It was great.
Wales putting up a record 40 points on England.
Never done that before. 40 points scored against England. 40-24 it finished. And for the fourth try bonus point, which could be pivotal as well at the end of it all as well.
Secured clutchly at the end after Sheedy's interception and then Corey Hill coming in. It was it was a beautiful performance in many ways. 4 tries on the board and a wonderful Triple Crown claimed.
Yes, champions deserve Triple Crown champions, I think, as well. It was a really
we'll get into that. The lucky talk needs to be piped down because this is a team that's attacking really well. And they blew England away for the most part. They rode their luck with decisions, and we did talk about that at the top of the show. The refereeing wasn't great, I think, on a couple at those tries. On another day with another ref, it might have happened another way, but they were looking to catch England sluggish, and boy did they catch England sluggish. And saw home an easy win against an England team that was outmatched and looked not sharp and gave away penalties and didn't paint its picture often enough.
And ultimately, the hungrier and more accurate team won. And we'll start by looking at it from their point of view as well. That was Wales, current Triple Crown champions, and going for the Grand Slam. And because of France not fulfilling their fixture, they're sitting now alone atop the table, and good value for it too. They're in great shape going into the last 2 weeks. And from their point of view, it was a beautiful performance. They continue to play just lethal attacking rugby. Really good conversion rate, putting 40 on England. First time any Wales team has ever done that, which is just a really good notch in Pivac's belt as well, and just kind of emblematic of what they're really all about. They take tries instantly without any apology. They don't need to be asked twice. And playing the whistle versus not playing the whistle was there was a fair bit of that going in this game, because as schoolboys you're told to play the whistle, and Biggar and Alan Wynne-Jones showed good awareness for that first try, whether you thought it should have stood or not. Regardless, from a Wales point of view, they played the play perfectly, and Josh Adams took the try nicely.
They knew the ref they had was a French ref who wasn't going to be vocal in terms of letting England know when the time was back on and giving them the time.
They just saw their chance.
So they were aware, but actually they were aware from just about every penalty, and they were always probing. I was a little sceptical going into this game of just how of whether they could continue with that class attacking style with the same reward, because they had Davis and North in the centre. They'd taken Tompkins out, who, while defensively ropey, was a great point of attacking impetus and attacking zip for them. But they worked around it. Even against tough English defence, they worked around it really well, and they looked for other areas of advantage. I think the biggest, most telling thing about this Wales team is that regardless of how they're going about it, they're hunting tries. And it's not to the detriment of everything. Like a couple of penalties, Biggar's having a look to see if there's a tap on, or Hardy's having a look, as the case may be, to see if England are dopey, because they've isolated that as a potential point of weakness and a potential source of tries for them. They're always looking for how they get 4 tries on the board, and this time it wasn't through the middle, it wasn't with the zippy hands of the centres, and even for the Liam Williams try that had that dodgy knock-on call, it was Josh Adams who they'd worked into the second distributor role, using both centres as dummy runners, because they knew he was a bit of a ball player. He puts a nice grubber through, the ball breaks for them, and they find the try. But the idea that it's luck is just kind of nonsense.
Well, and the other thing is Liam Williams plays on. He sees that there's a knock, and then it comes back. He's just playing the whistle, finish that try anyway, and let the decision be made after it. That's from a Wales point of view. That's all you can do, and they did it really, really well.
And this is the thing, is that people are calling them lucky because they're lacking in some areas. They're a little clunky at times. They actually have improved in that regard in terms of moving themselves about the pitch, but the opening couple of weeks they were dominated by territory. They were struggling up front to keep up. At times when teams scored tries against them, as England did, they looked easy enough to open up. And that's definitely true. But amidst it all, they're out there just hunting tries and knowing if they find enough of them,
they'll be on the right side.
They'll be on the right
scoreboard.
side of the result. And I think for people to call lucky, it's kind of laughable. It's like when people used to say, you know, the ball always bounces for France.
Yeah,
they always get the bounce of the ball, and it's because they're the only ones consistently
putting the chips in,
putting the kicks in behind, trying to attack. And when you play with that level of determination to score tries, good things can happen for you.
Indeed.
It's why I was so annoyed with Italy. I mean, just show the intent.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't work out, just show the intent to score tries, and you never know. Keep working chances, and sometimes you get a year like this where it does click and you get scores on the board because you're constantly looking for them.
Indeed. Other
teams aren't doing that as well.
And it's just from a selfish point of view as well, seeing a really quick-witted, dynamic and clinical team punish a lumbering, off-pace, kind of dopey England team is one of just my favourite things in rugby. When the All Blacks do it, I love it. When Ireland do it, it's my favourite thing in rugby. But even watching Wales do it and catching them napping for all three of the tries, like my favourite being the Kieran Hardy one, because actually had I was wondering what happened on the first thing. It's like, how did he get through there? And then it was actually the post pad shot that revealed just Elliot Daly, here's the whistle, and again trots back to the post, turns his back on the play as soon as he hears the whistle. And again, as I said with the bigger one at the top of the show, just he didn't point to the post yet, lads. You can't, like, the back three need to hold their width. If there's a cross kick there, the fullback needs to be dialed in. He wasn't. There was no controversy. Kieran Hardy was awake, Daly was not, and in he goes untouched. And it's a satisfying thing to see quick-wittedness rewarded and slow dopiness punished so accurately. And that was a great try for it, and a very important try as well taken by Kieran Hardy, who it turns out they were very right to go with. The one caveat to Wayne Pivac, which I actually think some of his substitutions were really, really on the money when he brought Bigger off. It was quite early, pretty ballsy call, but they still got the back line moving with Callum Sheedy. I thought the one caveat was I thought maybe Kieran Hardy could have been subbed off literally as that try was scored, if not a couple of minutes soon thereafter, because he'd already started to look a bit weary because he set such a tempo and just ran all day, and then he just started to look a little fatigued, and he played 65 minutes in the end. It was probably a little too much, and he actually went off because he took a serious shot. And that was like, it was a shot that he probably didn't need to take because he probably could have been hauled out there.
It did look like he was struggling to get to breakdowns before he was taken off for Gareth Davis, but he's definitely the number one at the moment. I think going into the next round, or him or Thomas Williams, but he played very well.
I think he has the jersey now with a showing like that. It's up to Tomas to come and steal it, but it's great options for Wales. They have a lot of good nippy scrummies and quick-witted,
very
halfbacks.
Similar mindsets, passing really well. They work the extremities really well in attack. It's not where their tries came from at the weekend, because they all came from catching.
But some of their middle third play was good in that area, and actually George North, the 100 cap man in centre at 13. We've had doubts about it. A lot of people have doubts about him at 13. I thought it was his best performance in the centre I've ever seen.
No, he was great.
He was really, really good the whole game.
Maturing, hopefully his head holds up and he minds himself in that way, because he does have the potential to age really well.
If he's lost a yard or two of pace for the wide channels, 13 could be a good adjustment for him for sure. And if he keeps putting in performances like that,
he has a good understanding of the game now. He's got so much experience for a guy of his age. And sky's the limit still for him as far as I'm concerned. He could still end up in Lions teams, and who knows, still a classy player. I wasn't loving the balance in the centres. I still think they struggled with passing at times, but actually they accommodated really well. I thought Bigger actually had his best game of the championship.
He did, and as such, a related stat, you were talking about territory and possession, where they in some versions of breaking down the game, they were dominated by Scotland and Ireland in terms of those stats. This time they managed to, in the manner of this win, was just a bit more controlled. Even though they were quick-witted enough to punish England, they managed to, they topped both those counts. They were 54% territory, 56% possession, which is good to see from them.
They exploited England's ill discipline and managed the ref situation really well.
Much better,
And the riding of the luck that happened was that England sort of gave them entries to the game with a lot of penalties and didn't deal with what was a pretty average kicking game. I think the kicking game on exit
might be their weakest factor in the whole thing.
It's pretty average. Like, they obviously didn't kick for lineouts, they tried to kick deep, but a lot of the kicks were neither one thing nor the other, neither contestable nor particularly deep. And England's struggles launching off counter-attack were what cost them there, and very often just giving away penalties in the exchanges or giving away the ball in the exchanges was a big differential. But it was good nous from Wales, just making things that bit more difficult
100%.
for an England team that really it likes its comfort zone.
It does, and it likes to set up attacks in the red zone. Like they, as far as controlling that game, they kept England to only 3 minutes of the play clock spent in their 22 in their red zone, which is just really good, managing their way around the pitch. And they conversely, they themselves spent 6 minutes of the game in the opponent's 22 and racked up 40 points for the first time. Their conversion rate continues to be impressive.
It probably worsened the continue race from what it was at, but it's a showing of the better balanced performance that they put in, and winning a few more battles in the middle of the park to help them get down the park was key for them. And I think shout out to Adam Beard as well, because his role in that offense in the wide channels
link play
is really, really good. I think he's playing brilliantly.
He is. He 100% is. He's well worth his place. He's been brilliant, and he's like linking very well. You doing that? We
he's
saw the
like Sam Whitelock,
or even Brodie Retallick, the smaller Brodie Retallick, but just the linking with the hands and just creating those little pod systems that do reach the extremities and just asking good, solid questions of defences.
The whole width of the field, their passing is really sharp, and I guess we've talked a lot about them already, but Wayne Pivac's decision to take Bigger off with Bigger playing so well just to get Sheedy on, where I actually thought there was an option which could still have worked of putting Bigger to 12 and maybe taking Davis off, who's only in and out from injury, and putting Sheedy on there might have worked as well. But as it worked out just as well. Sheedy was in great form. They backed him again after Bigger had been playing well for nearly a whole half.
And they were doing a lot of that in the run up to the World Cup before Gareth Anscombe sadly got taken out of it through injury. They were doing a lot of that, the rotation of Bigger and Anscombe and shared responsibility. And they do that with the halfbacks too. It's not a terrible idea. It gives you continuity. It gives you that zip of energy and a little bit of a new look for a defence that might just, in that start of the second half, just be getting to grips what you're presenting on offence and then suddenly change it entirely. It's a useful card to be able to play, and it's beyond faith in your bench. Like you see, we criticise Ireland a lot in the big game. If Conor Murray's at 9, he will play and maybe come off if the game's secured in the 79th minute, which is just like not trusting your bench at all. This is a completely different and superior approach.
Understanding it's a 23-man game, and isn't it a nice thing for Pivac that a brave call works out, in the sense that you would have forgiven him for not being totally trusting of Sheedy from the tee. As good as he looked off the bench against Scotland moving the ball, he had a couple of bad kicks.
He did.
But then he
comes on,
he kicks 3 consecutive clutch penalties, none of them that straightforward. No hint of a miss from him. And it pushes them, gives them the win of the game, and actually makes the clutch pick on Robson, the scrum half, to run nearly the length of the pitch and secure their 4th try for them. So he comes on and has just an amazing impact, and in another world the coach is thinking, geez, I make that call, he comes on, misses a rake load of kicks, and we lose the game by a score. I look like an idiot with the way Bigger's playing. But after the year, the annus horribilis that was 2020, where everything that could go wrong did go wrong,
and they were never
nice
as
to see
bad
a brave call
as all that as well. Like, people were writing them off fully, and yet some of the tries they scored in that year, despite them all being in losing performances to big teams, were beautiful. And it's like there was, considering what they've been doing, what he'd been doing with Scarlets as well. It's their right to stick with him. He has a vision for them. It's very distinctly Welsh rugby in terms of the flair and the tempo they're setting and the attack they're doing. And overall, they're just well worthy for their Triple Crown. Congrats to Wales fans for that. And in a great spot now. They have Italy next in a couple of weeks, which they will routinely hose, as we kind of went through the reasons why in our Ireland segment. But they will probably get through that and then tee up a grand final in Paris, which will have all the stakes to it.
It'll be unreal. It'll be. I'm really looking forward to that game, because they have the tools. They still, as tough as they are, they can be beaten up physically to an extent. Their kicking game can be exploited. Their defence looked good at times but shaky at other times. They rode their luck against Scotland, not conceding in the red zone. The couple of times they let England in, they did concede, but they have other qualities. They have playmaking qualities. They have the likes of Wyn Jones in there making plays all day from loose head. They have Chip Tipperick, who's just a non-stop playmaker. Navidi comes into the team, really helpful. Beard in the extremities, unreal. Alan Wyn Jones hassling a Toji. They play streetwise rugby. They play attacking rugby. They're sharp. They're clever. They find tries. They're an intimidating prospect for any team in World Rugby, make no mistake about it. Well worth the Triple Crown.
Man, sure, who'd bet against them? They're on for their Grand Slam, and usually momentum is a very tough thing to take away from Wales.
When they get to Grand Slam deciders, are they 100%? I can't remember when they lost.
I can't think that there might be. I doubt they're 100%, but their conversion rate is in the Six Nations era.
In the last decade, even in the Six Nations era, like when have they lost a Grand Slam?
Welsh fans, you need to drop it in the comments and let us know.
I can tell you that if Alan Wynne-Jones, if they do pull it off, Alan Wynne-Jones will have 4 career Grand Slams.
Yeah.
Ireland have 3 in their history since
There
the
you go.
1800s.
There you go. Alan Wynne-Jones
could have 4 Grand Slams. I mean, what they're to be learned from, not scoffed at.
No, indeed. This is it. Well done, Wales. 100%. But it takes 2 to tango, and I suppose we will pivot on from Wales and look at the game from an England point of view, which obviously kind of means it's a bit of a disappointment. It was, disappointing, but inarguably a deserved end to their title defence, which is exactly what it is. Like, ultimately, Italy could, I suppose, but conceivable that France and Wales could lose enough to do it, but it's not going to happen. So
that's inconceivable, because nobody's going to lose to Italy. Nobody's going to come close, and
indeed.
that Ireland performance cemented that in my mind. They're not going to beat anybody, so don't worry about them.
No, so that means that this is the end of their title defence. However, they can't really, like, obviously there were complaints about the referee, they had grievances, but they really need to turn that analytical mind inwards, and as they were even saying in post-match interviews, they need to control what they can control, and they gave away too many sloppy penalties. They conceded 14 penalties to Wales's, I think, 9 by the end, but that doesn't even tell the story of just they were racking up sequences of penalties, and pretty crucial ones at crucial times that really did them in and allowed for Wales to edge the territory game, edge the possession game, and ultimately rack up 40 points against them.
I mean, if there were 2 points of emphasis you'd be looking at for England, number 1 obviously would be discipline, and this has almost been talked to death in the last while. Discipline is not just not conceding penalties. I think discipline relates to just
the nature of your performance.
Yeah, the nature of your performance. You think of what do you think of discipline? What's like a disciplined force is like an army of soldiers where they're going to do exactly what you tell them. None of them's going to be falling behind when they're running. They're all going to be together.
But even when they're parading, they're going to be in step and be in rhythm with each other.
And England are just completely not that at the moment. That's the only difference. Actually, in many ways, from an attacking point of view, this was great. Like, they fell behind and it forced them to attack, and they looked a lot less impotent than they looked the first 2 rounds. They looked sharp to a scary degree in terms of, there's that offense I remember where it's just a million different runners, forwards and backs linking together in different pods all across the pitch. Every man an option, inside and out. Every carrier a dynamic one with a good read on the game.
And a physicality.
Exactly. Jamie George takes a pass off 9 and whips the ball to Watson for the end of his try, which is after sequence of
what they were all about. And then even the Ben Youngs one, he was alert to take it with the snipe, but the whole sequence was beautiful.
Movement, getting May in the extremities, moving the ball, finding the space, and that one was a little lateral, just the yardage he chalked up by moving it from right to left with so many different options and a couple of screenplays, playing as they had done circa 2019 with like great depth, coming onto it from tempo. From real depth, but with quality passing and speed across the line. Getting the ball across the line in a flash despite that depth into May's hands, into Watson's hands, getting those guys on the ball. I thought the attack looked as good as it had done. And I really don't think, like, despite the scoreline, like it 3 tries really you can probably attribute to just being a bit asleep. A bit not awake, a bit not in step with the game. And I think a lot of penalties as well.
But then the natural response to a penalty in your red zone should not be for the whole team to converge under the posts, particularly before any signal has been made. Even when time off is called, that shouldn't be done. Like, even if there are words have to be had with your captain or with the other team, wingers should still be watching for crossfield kicks and covering, and ideally the line should be set.
It shows a naivety to the guy who's refereeing the game, as well as much as you think, like, as we said at the top of the show, like, Nigel Owens is not gonna do what Gozair did. He's not gonna just mutter time on and not tell England. He's gonna give them the benefit of the doubt if he's asked him to talk to his players. But there does have to be an understanding from England's point of view that that you have to be awake to the prospect of the game, and then to concede that try and then not be awake for the Hardy one is just crazy.
It's just the exact same thing.
Reveals that they're just dialed out.
Indeed.
And I think likewise goes for the penalty count. I mean, Itoje had 5 penalties, and there's a lot of people coming out of the woodwork in media circles and fan circles coming for Itoje. And I just want to say I'm going to bet against you guys in the long run. And you're going to look silly. Like there's people saying he's ruled himself out of Lions captaincy.
Nonsense. He has to be.
Well, he doesn't have to be Lions captain.
He doesn't, but he has to be a Lions starter.
Yeah, he might well have ruled himself out of captaincy, but this guy is an extraordinary player and he's a playmaker.
Yeah.
And he's always got to read on the game. He's always got to read on your defence. So he comes in and he stifles it and he snags it. And when he's a little bit off step, as he has been, because he hasn't been playing rugby for a while.
Oh, sorry, sure. Farrell's been a little off.
Exactly.
We've seen it from a lot of them.
When he's just a little bit out of step with the game and he's coming through on defences, he times it a little wrong, or he gets it just a little bit wrong and he gives away penalties.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's a big adjustment. I think it's a minor adjustment, and he's still got the great reading of the game, that awesome, just attributally speaking, he's an incredible athlete. He can go for 80 minutes. He's a great physical matchup against most other teams.
Indeed.
And I think that they really aren't far from clicking and becoming 2019 level good again. I think it's just a few adjustments.
They're missing one man with Tuilagi, and they generally miss. They're missing just that cohesion in general, and we saw glimpses of it. Like as we said, those 2 tries were little windows into what this England side can be at their very, very best. But on balance, that wasn't the performance we saw from them. They were patchy, they were stop-start, and they were not helping their cause by upsetting their own rhythm. But it was Wales were the sharper team, and if they're honest with themselves, that's just for the full 80 minutes. Wales were more dialed in and they were a little bit more dialed out, and Wales punished them for it.
And they didn't exploit Wales's bad kicking game. The other point of emphasis for them would be just the counter-attack.
Stop kicking a lot and be more accurate as well.
They didn't kick sometimes, but on other times, they just didn't move the ball very well. They tend to like to launch off set piece and get uncomfortable when not launching off set piece. And you have to be able to just sort of adjust your system a little bit to work a phase play chance, because teams that kind of figure it out just kick it deep against England. Don't give them that line out up in your half, which is what they want when they restart down into your corner every time. They want a line out, kick it deep, and then they have to come up with a response to that. And they still haven't done that. So from an attacking situation, there are things to work on, and the kicking game isn't as sharp as it was as a consequence of that. But I just think they're minor adjustments, and I think anybody coming for Itoje is crazy, and anybody who thinks that Itoje's not going to start for the Lions is equally crazy, because that man's a machine. He's a playmaking machine.
He's one of the few locks in the Northern Hemisphere that you would feel confident throwing in against the Springboks. A lot of the others you wouldn't.
Because he's got a capacity to unsettle mauls, unsettle defences, to make he's a playmaker, as I say. He's a playmaker, and playmakers, when they get it wrong, they give away penalties.
They're a little bit off. Yeah, you see it with Munster guys a lot of the time, like Peter O'Mahony can rack up a serious penalty count. When he's Tyke Byrne does so for Ireland as well. If you're competing at the line out at all, you're going to be on the fine margins of, are you being thrown across, are you playing the man? Sometimes you are, and that's a penalty. And when you're more dialed in, you're more accurate, you're going to get the ball more often than not, and Itoje's great at that when he's in his pump.
When he's at his very best, he's unplayable. And that's why, and he's not
not
going to be that far
and
off.
It wasn't just Itoje. You had key performance. Curry looked a little dialed out, certainly compared to Navidi and Tipurick's contributions. Curry was a bit nowhere and was guilty of a few penalties himself, and then other guys as well. Johnny Hill, a few sloppy little shots as well, a few sloppy clunky little exchanges. Farrell, as I mentioned, Slade, that missed tackle for the bonus point try, or that soft tackle that from a Slade from a Wales point of view, it's a lovely clinical attack. On second phase, they crash over under the sticks.
I don't blame Slade.
I know, but from a 13's point of view, you want to do a bit better. But
maybe if it's he comes flying out and smashes a guy, but most 13s in Test rugby
aren't going to make
that tackle, just because it's a lock and the damage has already been done. He's completely isolated one-on-one.
Halaholo won his contact first out.
He not only won his contact, he circled around and sucked half the English defence in. That was another example of them just being completely dialed out. That was the other one, along with the 2 tap penalties, that I thought was just them being completely dialed out of the game.
Well, it was already over as a contest at that point, and they coughed up a cheap score.
By the way, Corey Hill should fix and give there.
He should,
outside him.
No, I know, it's an easy drop, but he crashes over, then it's fine. Good to grab a bit of meat if Wales keep scoring. But who else was there? Daly was the other one I was thinking. I haven't made it, but Elliot Daly had a really poor game from 15. The worst moment being that Kieran Hardy try, where he's just completely switched off and trotting back to the posts.
The comical knock on.
A lot of that was terrible too. Yeah, a lovely potential move stymied by just a curious case of the drops from your fullback, which is just never fun. We've seen it in Ireland before with a few different personnel, and it's no fun to watch. And Daly had a rough day at the office himself.
Yeah,
so
it's all the Saracens. That's
guys
who
are out just not playing enough rugby, and it's understandable in this year. But it's not it's not like they're completely at sea. Then they're still at this level. They were beaten by the better team on the day, and they didn't really deny that. They'll be perfectly accepting of that. But from an Ireland or a France point of view, there's still games to come, and there's still potential. They're 1-2 as it is, but they could win both those games and upset the apple cart for France potentially, and easily
at home, Twickenham, easily,
and get them. So they'll be like Ireland, scrapping to try and get a 3-2 positive record out of this, and then place somewhere on the table, keep a bit of momentum to go in, because they're like, when you lose, if they're being brutally honest, if you lose on day one to Scotland, it's probably not going to be your year regardless, and it has transpired as such. It's Wales's year as far as the Triple Crown's concerned.
What do you think Eddie Jones should do from a squad point of view for them going forward? This is a big question that's going around in England, because I don't know an answer, because I can see there is a case to be made like that. Certainly arguments for dropping the likes of Billy Vunipola or Maro Itoje, scuppers those guys' Lions chances, because they're only going to play championship rugby. If they aren't playing test rugby, they're playing no top level rugby. And are they going to be in any kind of form? I mean, maybe these are the games they need to knock the rust off going forward into the rest of the season, where presumably they can get themselves promoted, go out and play a Lions tour, and then come back on top of the world ready to go again for England. And for guys like Itoje, that might feel, clearly it's worth getting him out there. That is
the sensible thing too, because Cruz is in Japan. Launchbury pulled out of the squad for personal reasons pre-tournament, and I think one other did as well. So no, it makes perfect sense to keep with Itoje and probably Hill. Vunipola one's more of a form one, because you have a guy like Sam Simmons who is lighting it up and is current European Player of the Year and European champion, and is just making play after play after play in his games in the Premiership. And Billy V is looking a little slower in there.
Is there a case to be made with? I think Itoje's probably a shut door case, because he's that good. He needs the minutes to get that good again, and he's just you know you're going to need him. He's an asset worth minding and worth protecting, which in this case involves giving him minutes, which involves to get him to a Lions tour where he'll play well presumably, and then come back just on top of the world, ready to go again with England, which I think is crucial, as compared to if you drop, let's say Billy Vunipola in this instance. You could see a scenario where he's already out of shape going into this season. He can probably do a job for Saracens at tier 2 level in England without necessarily getting back to anywhere near his best.
No, it's true.
Then he's going to be in a position where, can you bring him on a Lions tour?
I think it's all moot, because I think he will be playing for England ongoing regardless. I think Eddie's going to stick with it. He's a little. So I don't think Simmons is getting in despite all those lists.
So do you agree with that though?
No, I don't. I think Simmons should be in. I think you should.
You think you should drop Billy V?
Yeah,
and drop Farrell?
The Farrell debate is an interesting one, isn't it? Because they do have other options. You have Harlequin's guy Marcus Smith, who has been in the shadow squad before, looking brilliant. You have Joe Simmons at Exeter looking very good. Farrell is a little dialed out. The argument is like, he's not making the Lions tour on his current form, and England are losing the Six Nations, because at the moment the best out has options for the Lions are it's Finn Russell, and it's probably Dan Bigger and maybe Callum Sheedy on top of that. Like, those are the guys playing the best rugby at 10. Sorry Sexton, sorry Farrell, that's just the truth.
I can't disagree with that. Farrell's probably not even playing as well as Ford at the moment.
No, he's not. So it's a bit of a moot point as far as Lions are concerned, but I think Eddie will probably stick with them regardless, because he does trust his guys.
But do you understand that instinct where he's like, I don't want to just have these guys not play any top level rugby or even intermediate level rugby. And so instead, because I think I'm going to need these guys, I think I want Billy Vunipola for 2023. I think I want Farrell. I think I want Itoje, obviously, and even Daly. I want these guys playing for me, and then the next crop that can come through can wait. They're still playing Premiership level rugby. If I drop them, there isn't this potential for them to have no rugby for so long that you potentially lose any form or any rhythm that you had, which can be tough to get back.
Yeah, no, it's true. I think,
but maybe he's sacrificed the Six Nations by doing that, which I don't know if that's right or wrong. Maybe it's wrong.
Maybe we could see. Only time will tell with that. I'd imagine he'll probably stick with all of them. There's debates to be had with all of them. I think Itoje's the most important of all of those players we listed to their chances going on.
He's the one that there isn't an obvious replacement for.
No, there's no replacement for. He's one of the best players in the world, and he is still making great plays despite the penalty count, and he's not all that far off if he just cleans that up, being a phenomenal force for France or Ireland to have to deal with.
It won't even take that long with Itoje. Like, I think if there's a decent bet it's to be made is like, if you like, Itoje's going to have a class game against either Ireland or France, probably Ireland, knowing our luck. It'll take him one more game, he'll play okay against France, and then he'll come to Dublin ready to rock finally with the minutes behind him and the rust knocked off, and just be the best lock in the world, which
and there's potential for Billy V to be the best 8 in the world at times as well, so I understand sticking with him. The one I don't understand, and I know you don't understand either, but the only thing I can say that I understand about it is that Eddie Jones sometimes makes these decisions that he likes guys, and they're in there seemingly at the expense of all form. You had Mike Brown hold on to the fullback jersey for way too long, considering the quality of some of the other fullbacks in the Premiership. Alex Good, European Player of the Year a lot of the time, couldn't get a look in because I guess Eddie just doesn't like the cut of his jib. And similarly, Elliot Daly has not been at anywhere near the level he was even in that Lions tour a few years ago. He hasn't been at that level in a long time, to be honest, and that performance the weekend was really bad. Like, as bad as Itoje's penalty count was, there was nothing quite so egregiously bad from a rugby point of view as anything Daly did. And I think there are better options in the Premiership potentially. Like,
Max Malins, is that the guy you
Max Malins, who's in there at the moment? Like, I don't even know. I think Good is gone now, but you could do something else. You could do a couple of your potential moving 10s out there.
Well, what they have done,
I get he has a long boot, but I just don't. I don't necessarily see that he adds that much value for them.
No, I kind of agree. I think probably Malins is the next best guy, though. They don't have an obvious. They did in the time of Alex Good have an obvious guy
even
who
Mike
play.
Brown before you had guys like Foden and stuff never got a look in when they were in form, but it's just you trust a lot of guys. And then Spencer's the other one that we consistently mention is missing out. Like, obviously they brought in Northampton. Dixon was the scrum half they brought in when Randall got injured, and it's Alex Mitchell, that's right.
You're thinking back to Dixon
way back. Dixon was a different Northampton scrummy from way back when, but there's I know Bath are struggling sometimes somewhat in the Premiership currently, but they were a tragic looking team last year. They got Ben Spencer, who had been brilliant for Sarries, got him, and then they transformed them to a slightly more competent outfit that could move the ball. Yeah, I think he looks.
He was a guy they should have had faith in last year as well. I mean, listen, Robson has had good moments, but gee whiz, coming on, like, he had a catastrophic cameo off the bench against Scotland to start the tournament,
and he is throwing an intercept.
Back in completely free. You're still in the team, and then he comes in in this game, throws the game.
Came home to roost. Like, Eddie Jones gets a lot right, and he's a very clever guy. And I think the way that England look to play the game is very broad. Very good, and I think he gets a lot of things right, but it came home to roost. Like, we mentioned that Razzie got everything right in his rejigging of the Springboks and rescuing them 18 months out and putting together with all the talent in the world, picking the right 31 guys and making a run and completing it. Pre-tournament, England had a similar scenario, and they picked like the right 26 guys, and then there were a few dubious ones in there that you're like, really? And then where's this guy? There was Cipriani, there was Alex Good, there was Ben Spencer, who was not in the squad, and then ultimately was on the bench for the World Cup final. And not Wigglesworth, Youngs was having a terrible game, like awful game against the Springboks, and he had no faith in him because there's no minutes in Spencer in this system, so you just have to leave the floundering halfback on there in perpetuity and lose the World Cup final.
Like in another universe, you have a Ben Spencer with 10 caps in his belt to throw in. You've maybe got Cipriani to throw in if things aren't going well, and who knows, that could have been a game changer.
Indeed.
So the margins are small, and important to get that stuff right. So work to be done from Eddie Jones' point of view.
It's not their year, England. It is in fact Wales's year so far, and with France with still much to do in this tournament, but England sadly at 1 and 2, they're not going to feature. They're going to bow out, and their defence is probably done as of this week. But congratulations to Wales, now triple crown champions as it stands, and maybe more by the end of the tournament. Who knows?
Absolutely. Just before we wrap up the Six Nations, who do you have a favourite right now? I mean, Wales have 2 more games to win. France have 3. France now have to play those 3 consecutively.
Yeah, I'd probably have Wales as favourites just on momentum
France have
alone.
to go to what's their next game? They have to go to Twickenham.
Yeah.
Then they play Wales in Paris.
Yeah.
Then they play
Scotland the
Scotland
week after.
in Murrayfield. I would like that's probably 13 days,
Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah, from Saturday to Friday.
Yeah. No, I would shift Wales into favourite now.
Yeah,
Momentum is king, and as you say, they tend to convert when they
just
put
likely
themselves in this
enough that
position.
France lose in Twickenham or it's not Murrayfield, but Paris to either Wales or Scotland. It's
indeed.
likely enough that they lose one of those games, and if it's to Wales, that's it.
Yeah, and if it's to England, it could be Le Crunch and Twickenham rarely goes France's way.
Yeah.
It could do this year. They definitely have the potential, but there's scope for England to throw the spanner in their works, and it could just come up Wales, you know.
Or they could come back with a fire under their belly, because I mean, listen. The last time, it's always this weird dynamic when you have a team who the last time they took the field they were favourites of the championship and won, and now they're not favourites of the championship. They might cock a quizzical eye
writing off France. It's going to be one of Wales or France. That much I think I know.
I don't think you do.
I think I do.
You never know. The Scots are still in there, still swinging.
They are still swinging, more so than England or Ireland, and certainly
Scotland
more than
have to
Italy.
beat Ireland. That's the next thing.
That is,
they can't look past that now.
Indeed, and that's the next mission for them. Yeah.
Anyway, we'll talk about all that next week. The Six Nations is just too much fun.
Indeed.
But we do have other rugby to talk about, so we'll move on and park it there.
100%. All right. Thank you for tuning in to the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you enjoyed what you hear, please like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below as well. We enjoy hearing your opinions too. Thank you.